one, you bastard!
Brought to you by supporters who probably have better taste than this schmuck.
The smallest transforming Transformers line was immensely popular when it first came out, even though it was cancelled shortly after. Over the years, it's developed a pretty hardcore fan base, despite the fact Takara hasn't really acknowledged its existence since. A lot of people have even continued it themselves. I mean, you've got Just Toys, the third-party guys, and the 3D printing scene is huge on this kind of stuff. But here's the problem with shrinking down G1 toys. You kind of have to walk a tightrope. Do you improve the G1 toys to develop a better experience, or do you stick 100% to the original for the sake of accuracy? Well, I think today's review answers such, and oh boy, I'm not looking forward to this. At first glance, these two seem pretty unassuming. They seem pretty damn good. In terms of looks, it seems okay, but then you start examining some of the context around them, and they quickly fall apart under scrutiny. But first off, let's take a look at the good. Starscream. Damn, that is a nice jet mode. They've got some lovely red highlights on the whole thing and some wonderful mechanical detail on the wings. Seems, at first, like a pretty clean jet mode. Go to the back here, and they've gotten the thruster section and everything absolutely perfect. A lot of third-party Legends figures seem to make that all scraggy, and I'm not a fan of it. But given that this is a G1 toy, they're able to get it pretty close to the G1 figure, which was very accurate to the jet mode. So it's done quite well. Of course, being a G1 toy, the underside is pretty clean, all things considered. You got nice, lovely missiles on the bottom there, the missiles that came from the original toy. Not the null rays that you probably would expect from a more modern iteration, but it's not what this figure's trying to do. What it is trying to do, it's doing really well. Nice, big, beefy con symbols. Real good, real good. But he pales in comparison to how amazing Thrust looks. Jesus Christ. Wowzers, this is amazing. The crimson on this thing, Jesus, it's so beautiful. And that's not black paint. It might look like black paint on the camera, but actually it's a really, really dark gunmetal. And it's got a metallic fleck to it. That is so good. And the tampergraphs, the magical tampergraphs they've got here and even at the back here, damn, that's amazing. Looks-wise, these are damn fine smallest transforming Transformers alt modes. But we're not really focused on the looks of this. We're focused on everything else. Problem number one, adherence to the source material. This one I can kinda give leeway to because it's the way the G1 toy was. You know why they call the G1 toy the cigar? Harbor yoink, harbor yoink, harbor yoink, harbor yoink. This was the biggest problem with the G1 toy. Bullshit parts forming. Now, this one I can kinda get. There wouldn't have been a way to peg all of this in and keep it in place. I'm sure there is a way out there, but not at the budget these were trying to do. These were supposed to be blind packed figures. You can't make blind packed figures that expensive. This guy's exactly the same. They're all exactly the same. The reason they had such crazy wing designs was because they're all interchangeable, which is why they call G1 Starscream the cigar, because a lot of second-hand ones on the market are missing all of its accessories. That I can kinda let slide. It's referencing the G1 toy. It is what it is. What I can't let slide is how flimsy it is in other areas. This was never a thing on the G1 toy. This thing where the legs just pop off? Nah, it didn't happen. Beyond that, I'll take it one step further. This bit, just popping off. Weak and flimsy. That was also never a thing on the G1 toy. That, on a figure of this size, doesn't matter. It's unacceptable. So then you're just kind of left with all of this stuff. Like, to a certain extent, it's a G1 Starscream. All of that stuff has to happen. It's shrinking down the G1 toy. It's supposed to have parts forming pieces. I'm not a fan of that, but I understand. But then you get to all the other shit and adding all the other parts forming. I just can't accept that. At that point, you're basically using all of the parts forming as a crutch just to make things simple. Because why should you bother fixing any of this? Why should you bother changing any of it? And beyond that, let's take a look at the leg section. What the hell am I looking at here? This ugly gap here was never really a thing on the G1 toy. Well, it was, but it was never this egregious. There was a gap, yes, but it wasn't this wide. Seems like in the move to shrink it down, they've widened the gap, and it just looks hella ugly. I would have much preferred if they'd taken the same route as some of the other toys. I would have preferred they just made this all one solid piece at the back here and just kind of implied the legs. Yes, it would have been different to the original G1 toy, but they've made modifications to G1 toys in the past in this line. Well, I say in the past, but it's all in the past because this line is cancelled. And on top of that, where's the diecast in these? These feel really lightweight for what they are, and don't say that they didn't use diecast in the smallest transforming line because Optimus Prime has some. Not to mention the Just Toys figures do, so it's kind of got up their game. Although these came out before the Just Toys figures, so that kind of makes sense. But yeah, these are pretty disappointing jet modes, and if you think that's bad, Wait till you get beyond that. But before any of that shit, here he is next to a standard Legion figure, a standard Core Class figure, a standard War for Cybertron Micromaster, and Crumbs. And in terms of dimensions, he is 9.5 centimeters long and 6.5 centimeters wide. And as for thrust, he is 8.5 centimeters long and 7 centimeters wide. Now, the transformation is virtually identical to the G1 toy, which means it's kind of bad. You want to take these things and rotate them down, rotate the wings 90 so that you can get the arms around, bring the nose cone down ever so slightly, reattach any bits as they fall off, that's going to happen quite a bit, rotate the arms out like so, the head pops down and into the open chest, rotating around and fully into place. The head will then just peak at the top there and you'll fold back that section. You then fold the wings up, and out of nowhere, you've got attachable fists. Yes, parts forming. I really dislike this, but I understand why. This part is supposed to be mimicking the G1 toy, except for one quick thing we'll get to later that kind of debunks that idea, but whatever. Feet fold down, and last but not least, you take the bombs at the back there, just pop them right off, and you got the holes on the side of the arms where they peg into. Really tight fit, and things will probably fall off in the process. So yeah, here's what it is. It's a G1 Starscream, which is not good, but that's kind of the design. Oh, and I guess you also bring these wing bits back here, like so. Yay! Of course, thrust is identical, but being a conehead, you're supposed to leave that section up. And oh, look at that. It's all hollow. Fantastic. And in robot mode, it's the same old shit. They're painted fantastically, and they're a great representation of what they are, but it's just a bit flimsy. Now, they are G1 Seekers. The G1 Starscream mold was a flimsy design. It just was. It wasn't the best G1 toy. But there's other shit on top of that that's just not great. For starters, the way these feet work, you've got all this hollowness at the front here. Ugh. Like, oddly enough, the hollowness in the chest doesn't bother me as much as it would. Like, that big hollow part there, yeah, sure, whatever. But all of this, ugh, come on. Hollowness from the front, what the f*** are you doing? And sure, you can undo the whole leg system thingy and just leave the bits off and keep the front of the jet at the front there, but it doesn't look good. And then you just got bits lying around that do nothing. Speaking of, already the fists lie around to do nothing and are super easy to lose. Already you can see on thrust here, I've completely lost them. So what's the problem with this? Why is that such a bad thing? Well, yes, the G1 toys had parts forming. You know what other G1 toy had parts forming? Let's bring in our old pal Optimus Prime for a second here. Prime's fists are completely molded in now. Getting the camera to focus on him, yeah, you can see right over there, they are molded in because they can't have fists that tiny to parts form. It's just not something they can do at the scale, which is why, yes, the chest is far fatter, some people might say, but I don't really mind it. So in the same line, they came up with solutions for this, and what did they do? Promptly ignored them and just went for the same old parts forming. I'm okay with them copying the same sort of parts forming from the original G1 toy. For certain things, that is. Like the wings, sure, whatever. The weapons, sure, whatever. But they had an opportunity to fix it, as they did with Optimus Prime, and they chose to ignore it. And what do you get with that? Well, you get lost pieces. It's hard enough keeping fists for Optimus Prime. Like my G1 Optimus Prime is missing its fists. This is just flat out bad. Oh, and word of advice, don't buy any of the KOs. I got a freebie KO for the G2 version, and it's even worse. The bits are actually segmented in two parts. They're actually not glued together like the officials, which means they're even more likely to break. Now, the articulation could be great with the ball-jointed arms. They get a lot more motion with that, and the legs are, yeah, fine. There's nothing in the legs except outward movement like that. Sure, whatever. This could be great, given the extra articulation, given the paintwork, but it's just flimsy. And of course, this bit just doesn't peg in very well. It just kind of flops back, so that's an extra thing to worry about as well. All in all, there's a lot I can forgive with these two because of their G1 roots, but then they add extra things on top of that that make them worse than the G1 toy. Like the hollowness in the nose cone. Come on, man. That's from the front. It's not okay. It's just, they could have fixed certain things and they didn't, and they could have left some things as they were and they made them worse. That's why I don't think these are great figures. Dimensions-wise, 6.5 centimeters by 6 centimeters. And of course, like the alt mode, 7 centimeters wide, but 6.5 centimeters tall due to the extra height of the nose cone. He is a conehead after all. Who are you calling conehead? And if you're going for size comparisons, a standard Legion figure, dwarfed by a standard Core Class figure, a standard War for Cybertron Micromaster, and Crumbs. So yeah, I can't recommend this mold like I can easily the other smallest transforming Transformers figures. It takes a bad idea and makes it worse. And for the same reasons with people collecting in G1 collections, Starscream, it's just a figure you might as well skip. There's a reason I haven't brought this particular figure to this recording space. Like, I got all the legends here for the whole marathon. They're sitting right here. You know, I just take them out and do whatever I want with them. But I didn't with this one, because the amount of parts forming on show is just a nightmare. Yes, the original had parts forming, but Optimus Prime was able to get around it. It incorporated the fists into the full transformation. There was no reason not to do that with Starscream. At least the fists. That was the one thing they could have fixed, and they didn't even do that. The designers were wholly focused on 100% accuracy, and it's detrimental in this instance. Because G1 Starscream is one of the worst G1 toys, and I'm not exaggerating here, but f that, because we have to be exactly like the original, faults and all. I'm sorry, but I just don't agree with that. You can be accurate to the original in the proportions and the paint scheme, but you don't have to do it with the functionality. As far as I can gather, there was no reason to do that, and as such, this ends up being a deeply disappointing smallest transforming Transformers release. If you're collecting the whole set, then sure, go for it. There's not really much I can do to dissuade you from that. But if you're not going for completionism, it's an easy one to skip over, and if you do skip it, well, you'll thank me for it later. So thankfully, tomorrow we're tackling a release that is far less frustrating with... hang on a second. We're doing Warpath again. Okay, I guess this is a thing now, just doing characters one after the other. I mean, not complaining, it's just interesting how it turned out this year. But oh well, see you tomorrow.